I spent the last week at TIFF, watched about 25 films, but I wanted to go ahead and compile my top 10 favorite films of the entire festival. But before I get into it, as always, thank you guys so much for all of the support on the channel. If not for you guys, I wouldn't be able to go to cool things like this. Outside of the top 10 discussion, there were either films that surprised me a lot, disappointed me a lot, or hyped up films from Cannes that I didn't actually get to check out. For the most disappointing film, in my opinion, Sentimental Value doesn't really live up to the hype. I know it was getting a lot of Oscars buzz, but it's the most like 3.5 out of 5 movie for me. I never really connected to the character dynamics, and the overall idea of the movie just never really captured me, though I did say a lot more in my full review. Overall, I just wasn't the biggest fan of it. Also, Secret Agent featuring Wagner Moura, he actually won the Best Actor at the Cannes Film Festival for this film, and I actually really love his performance, and I love a good 2 hours of this movie, but there is an extra 40-50 minutes of this film that just felt like it could have been cut out. A couple of films that I wanted to check out but didn't get the chance to was firstly Sound of Falling. I heard amazing things for this film, but I was just way too tired, and I gave my ticket to my friend who ended up giving it a 5 out of 5, so I'm happy it went to some good use. And then was Surat. These are actually both films that I didn't have on my schedule originally, but somehow fit into my schedule, and then also just never ended up checking out. I heard decent things about that one as well. I just, again, couldn't fit it on the schedule. As for Most Surprising, and obviously I will be talking about these films a little bit later in the video, but just for quick reference, Hamnet and The Testament of Ann Lee were two films I knew little to nothing going in about. Actually, Ann Lee, I wasn't planning to check out at all whatsoever until all my friends were like, we have to go to the press screening. Again, I'll get more into details on those later, but starting off the list, in 10th place for me is Obsession at a 4 out of 5. This is actually a horror film made for under $1 million. It's a directorial debut, and I think the best way to encapsulate what this movie is it's just a really great concept, and it's simple, and there are some magical slash fantastical elements to it, but it all just focuses on characters. It feels like your average horror movie at times, but it's just so well crafted that you can't help but have such a fun time with it. And 9th place for me is Blue Moon at a 4 out of 5. This is one of the two Richard Linklater films that premiered at the festival, the first being Nouvelle Vague, which is a retelling of the making of the film Breathless, which is nowhere near this list. It's actually one of the worst films of the festival in my opinion. Blue Moon, though, follows Ethan Hawke as a playwright, and Margaret Qualley's also in the film. I think this is just such an amazing representation of being one of the many pieces that goes into creating art, and how if one piece isn't properly, I guess, polished, then you can just easily be replaced. All of this while also being just a great Richard Linklater film in that the dialogue flows so well. I don't think it's as gorgeous as some of his other movies, but this does do exactly what you expect in terms of it's a lot of talking. It's Ethan Hawke just delivering on all cylinders, and then you also just care about all of the thematic undertones of being an artist. And 8th place for me is Train Dreams at a 4 out of 5. I actually knew nothing about this film going in, did not have it anywhere near my schedule, but as the festival went on, a lot of my friends were hyping this up. Like, I'm talking 4.5 and 5 stars across the board, and this is such like a simple slice of life film that I think works perfectly. It's beautiful, but it's also just so disturbing in a very simple way. It's like the purpose of life, and I feel like I've seen a million of those movies at this festival, but it kind of feels like this existential calling that, you know, you are put on this earth to do something. I felt like a lot of the ideas of this film came together in its final act, and when I say they came together, it's not just that it completed the puzzle, but it rewrote and recontextualized the whole story, at least in my eyes, as someone who's not in this point at his life. Understanding what this character is going through just proves how great the writing is. I absolutely love this film, and I am really interested to see if it'll get a theatrical release. It's one of the main reasons I checked it out at TIFF, is because it's a Netflix film, and I don't know if it's ever going to play in theaters, and it is an absolutely gorgeous movie, and it's worth seeing on the big screen. In 7th place for me is Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery at a 4 out of 5. I'm a huge fan of this franchise, and I hate that this film is so low on the list. I just saw amazing films at the festival. I'll talk much more about this film and the whole franchise in my review, which will come out a little bit closer to the movie coming out. I know I dropped a bunch of reviews already, but this film actually doesn't release for like 2 or 3 more months. But this does to me feel like Rian Johnson's return to form in a way. It's the most visually striking Knives Out film by far, in my opinion. And in addition to this, it's just the most thematically interesting, I guess, since the first film, but even the first film was more just based completely in humor. This one does that, but since it's also talking about faith and belief, and not necessarily necessarily challenging it, but bringing pieces together that help you understand why people have faith and the good and bad behind it. It's inherently just a much more interesting conversation than the other two films have brought up. I will say, on the negative side of things, the cast of characters isn't really that strong. I mean, no one is going to be as strong as a bickering family in the first film. You saw a little bit of a downhill slide, especially in the second film, but here I think it's stronger than the second film, and faith is the thing that ties them together, which is why it's so interesting. But you don't really care about the dynamics, and in turn you don't really care about many of the reveals as who is the killer. In sixth place for me is Frankenstein at a 4 out of 5. In my opinion, this feels like a very definitive version of this story. It doesn't necessarily feel like an abomination of creation, but rather the birth of something new, which is why I really like this adaptation, why I feel like it is very in line with Mary Shelley's novel. I also don't have a video for this one up. I'm in a way closer to its release. I have a lot of thoughts on the film. One of the most interesting parts of the novel, in my opinion, is the idea of fatherhood and that like generational trauma aspect of it. In this film, that's the one thing that it does not nail down. I think it nails down the set design. I think it nails down the camera work. I think it nails down Oscar Isaac as the doctor. It nails down Jacob Elordi as the monster. I don't think the structuring of this film, from the prelude to part 1 to part 2 and then the ending, none of it really aids the generational trauma aspect of the story. Part 2 of this film does feel like Guillermo del Toro just flowing through thematic story and action sets like it's no problem. It has some clunky pacing in the first half, but genuinely the second half of this film is nearly perfect. Getting into the top 5, and fifth place for me is The Testament of Anne Lee at a 4 out of 5. Going into this festival, I did not have this movie on my watch list at all whatsoever. All of my friends convinced me to watch it, and I love this movie way more than I thought I would. Just in general, I'm not the biggest fan of period pieces. They usually end up feeling very clunky to me. It feels like it just never clicks and I can never connect to the time. This is so different. The runtime of this movie is absolutely perfect. Amanda Seyfried is phenomenal as Anne Lee. If not for another film higher on this list, I think this would be a pretty much Oscars nomination lock across the board. I think this adaptation of Anne Lee's character has very minimal depth, but Amanda Seyfried delivers a great performance that obviously elevates the minimal script writing. I got to watch the 70mm print for this film for like 10 minutes until the projector broke and they switched to digital. In fourth place for me is The Smashing Machine at a 4 out of 5. For the longest time, this was my most anticipated film of the festival, one of my most anticipated films for the back half of this year in general, but I really liked this film a lot, though I do have very minimal reservations. Specifically, the thematic evolution of this film feels very clunky to me, not necessarily shoehorned in, but I don't think it covers enough events for me to completely agree with the turn that Mark character as a human being takes throughout the runtime of the film. After the first trailer, all I could think of was the Iron Claw meets Uncut Gems, and it doesn't hit the emotional highs of the Iron Claw or the fast pace of Uncut Gems, but it is the in-between of all of that in the most perfect ways possible. A career best performance for The Rock. I think Benny Safdie was just going ham in the editing room. Emily Blunt is doing something really great here, even though her character isn't written that well. Her dynamic with The Rock is just like ever evolving. I can't believe they went from like The Jungle Cruise to this. This is just a tremendous look into the tenderness of being a man, defeat, losing, winning, how to cope with all of that as someone who just loves the game. I genuinely think this is a must-watch movie of 2025. It's, in my opinion, one of the best sports movies we've gotten recently. Like, all I can think of is this and the Iron Claw. In third place for me is It Was Just an Accident at a 4.5 out of 5. This was the Palme d'Or winner out of the Cannes Film Festival this year. It was one of my most anticipated after its win, of course, and I think this movie is so heartbreaking, but it's also hilarious. It comes in at about an hour 45, absolutely flies by. It feels like way too much of a comedic piece in the best ways possible. It's such a phenomenal exploration of anger and fear, and that just leads to such a hilarious film, such an exciting ride, but also one of the most haunting endings to a film I've seen in a very long time. In second place for me is Hamnet at a 4 4.5 out of 5. I think it's been 5 or 6 days since I've seen this movie, and I just cannot stop thinking about it. I'll watch whatever great films I saw after this at the festival, and I instantly am just like, whoa, Hamnet. I really knew nothing about Hamlet, William Shakespeare, Hamnet going into the film. I knew nothing about Jessie Buckley. I love Paul Mescal, love Chloe Zhao. And this is just like Chloe Zhao making every correct possible decision when making a movie. Perfect castings, perfect camera work, perfect acting, perfect cinematography, perfect holding on like every fucking shot, perfect score, perfect pacing, perfect runtime, perfect execution on literally any aspect you can think about. At a certain point, the sobs and sniffles from the audience were just a part of the score. Hamnet is one of those movies that really put you into the shoes of characters and into this life of characters, even if you haven't experienced anything like it whatsoever. In the first act of this film, I had a really hard time connecting to the characters, and I think it's because the love and relationship aspect felt a little bit shoehorned into me. But there is just a moment where the evolution of chemistry between Jessie Buckley and Paul Mescal is just so perfect, and it kind of snapped me into this, wait, this completely works, and now I'm gonna cry. I've gone back and forth a lot on my number 2 and my number 1, and I think the number 1 just edges it out because of my personal expectations for the film. But I mean, dude, Hamnet is one of the best films of the year. You have to watch this movie. With that being said, in first place for me is No Other Choice at a 4.5 out of 5. This is the new Park Chan-wook film following his only other work in the 2020s, which is Decision to Leave and The Sympathizer. And this feels like the perfect combination of both of those things, in that technically it feels so much like Decision to Leave, and thematically it feels so much like a commentary similar to what The Sympathizer had going for it. A film that feels essential today. It's a masterclass in every technical aspect, none left behind. Like, we're talking score, camera work, editing, everything is just perfect. There are moments where me and my friend next to me would just look at each other because a shot just made us come. When No Other Choice was announced to be at this festival after its premiere at Venice, I was super excited, let alone to be the third ever audience to see this film. My expectations were pretty much sky high, and that's why I think it's my number 1, because it lived up to my expectations and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I don't think there's a certain section of the movie or idea in this movie that boosts the juice up so much. It is just consistently so phenomenally done. Like, I think thematically, it's such about the circle of capitalism and how you can never really escape it. It's also just about the love for family and what you will and won't do, the lengths you will and won't go to. It's just about the power of money. And Park Chan-wook is like the perfect vessel of a storyteller to explain this idea to us. I have a full review already out for this movie as well. It's one of my favorite films of the year. It just feels like a classic Park Chan-wook movie, you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing that he does so differently here. It's just such an evolution of everything I already love. But guys, that wraps up my list for the top 10 must-watch films coming out of this year's TIFF. Again, thank you guys all for the support on the channel. None of this would be possible without you. Let me know what you guys have been up to, what movies you've been watching, and what reviews you'd like to see in the future in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.